Okay, we're about to get started. Welcome to the session here today. I hope everyone's having a good time this week. I think we're past the equivalent of the hump day of the conference, so we're past the midpoint, and hopefully you can keep your energy up and learn something. My name is Eric Cosman. I'm a contributing consultant to ARC, and I'm responsible for this session. And in this session, we're going to talk about the challenges that we face, the industry that is, with balancing two very fundamental forces. One of those being the necessity of change. We've heard all kinds of things here today and yesterday and basically all week about how things are changing, sometimes with our support, sometimes with our awareness, more often without, or one of those, or both. And yet at the same time maintaining stability. The underlying theme of this is cybersecurity, but it certainly won't be limited to that. But basically, it's the idea of how do we maintain, or how do we attain and sustain secure and reliable operations and still be able to be flexible enough to make changes. And I'm blessed to have some very good speakers here who are going to share with you their practical experiences in this area. Those of you that know me know that I like to talk, so I'm going to keep it very brief. And that I could probably talk about my past experience in my last life, but I'm not going to. I'll let them take that part of it. And so we have if I could just go back, these are I think if I can go back, maybe not. Okay, you saw the speakers and panelists, we'll leave it at that, okay? Yeah, all right. So without further ado, let me just make a few introductory remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Dan as our first speaker. Okay, so I also chaired a workshop earlier this week on Monday, and I had a slide very similar to this. This is verbatim quoted right out of the program. And so people ask me, well, why do you put something up there that's out of the program? I can read that. I do this just to highlight the salient points. And in this particular case, again, it's really a reiteration of what I just said a few minutes ago in slightly more succinct words. Balancing cybersecurity and safety risks with the imperative to modernize infrastructure, specifically control systems or manufacturing operations systems if you take a slightly broader view. And that's, oops, sorry. Just quickly by a show of hands, does this resonate with anybody? Are you faced with these challenges? Okay, good, good, good. Hopefully you'll learn something. I intend to learn something. So the fundamental challenge, as we said, just to put a picture around it, is speed of innovation versus stability and reliability. And there's nothing too revolutionary here. Sometimes the consequence of this is stasis. You know, there's a difference between stability and stasis, right? It's basically, we're so afraid to change anything, we just don't do anything. And so not only do you not enhance, improve, and expand, but you may not even react to things that you should be reacting to. So this is sort of the fundamental challenge. If we look at the innovation lifecycle, and I don't remember, I didn't put a source up here, so I picked this up from someplace, but basically we've all seen curves like this, you know, whether it's the Gartner curve or somebody else's curve. I like this particular one because it was similar to one that I drew at my previous employer years ago. But the idea is, you know, you're driven by technology and performance, and then it's kind of interesting. I've always found it interesting, and I managed technology portfolio at my previous employer for many years, and it's like, we used to say that we have a technology life cycle that goes from future to standard to mature to obsolete, and there's actually a fifth phase at the end called gone. And we don't talk about that phase because we've never reached it. So your portfolio just keeps building and building and building, and you end up with these extensive solution portfolio, which can become as much of an impediment as anything else. And that's kind of the takeaway here. It becomes a difficult, you know, a huge challenge. The other phrase I like to use is, and I don't remember who said this first, but it's the reason that God could create the world in 6 days is because he didn't have an installed base. So how do we balance? That's what we're here to talk about. And you don't need to listen to me. Like I said, I just wanted to set up the conversation. And so just a couple of things to set the basis. The asset owner is accountable for costs, consequences, and lost opportunities, because that's another way of looking at costs, right? Costs or lost opportunities. And I just put up here, the buck stops here, with due respect to Harry Truman. At the end of the day, the asset owner is responsible, and that's where the buck stops. And if we look at in the cybersecurity space as threat being a product of, risk being a product of threat and vulnerability and consequence, at the consequence stage, that's really where it stops. It's only the asset owner that can speak to consequence, no matter how many suppliers and integrators and consultants and advisors you own that one. I think this might be my last slide. The germ of the idea for this session came to me when I wrote an insight for ARC last fall on this very subject. And this, obviously you can't read that, but if you are an ARC client, you may or may not have taken the time to read something I wrote, in which case I thank you very much. But it is out there, it's available to you. And I think there was some talk about making it available to conference attendees, but if they didn't, feel free to contact me. I'm sure I can sneak you a copy. It's not a big document, it's 5 or 6 pages long, but it really was setting up this session. So with that, I'm going to stop and I've only used a few minutes because I didn't want to take time away from what you're really here to listen to, and that is practical experience. So as a first speaker, I want to introduce Dan Rosinski, former colleague, good friend of the Dow Chemical Company. Thank you.